Blog Talk Radio.
Opening music provided by bensound.com. Welcome everyone to today's Earth Energy Forecast Show on this Tuesday, September 10th, 2019. Thank you for joining us today, or if you're listening later to the podcast. I am your host, Joan Serio. Today's show goes to the heart of why I started Earth Energy Forecast. We're in a time of great change, and I feel it is imperative that we stay informed of the changes, whether they be earth changes, climate changes, political and societal changes, the latest scientific research about the shift, or changes in consciousness, the subject of today's show. When I was in Sedona, I met Ian Lungold, who introduced me to the teachings of the Mayan calendar. I shared his teachings in some of my workshops. Today, we'll dive much deeper into the Mayan calendar with expert Dr. Calleman, who will share with us how human consciousness is evolving in the ninth and final wave of creation of the calendar. Dr. Carl Johan Calleman was born in Sweden and received his PhD in physical biology from the University of Stockholm in 1984. He was mentored by a member of the Nobel Committees and later became a senior researcher of environmental health at the University of Washington in Seattle. He has served as an advisory expert with the World Health Organization and is quoted extensively in scientific literature. This scientific foundation became the launchpad for his other field of recognized expertise over the past 30 years, the Mayan calendar. It is this work that gives the greatest purpose to his life and renders his greatest service to humanity in these critical times. Dr. Calleman's work is revolutionary in that he discovered within the calendar a logical progression and plan for the dramatic ebbs and flows of civilization's shifts that are evident throughout the timelines of human history. Together with noted author and teacher Barbara Handclough, their work has revolutionized our modern-day understanding of the Mayan calendar and our divine origin through an advanced interpretation of the relationship between science and spirituality. He has written 5 internationally published books on his findings, which are fundamental to the understanding the greatest framework of human existence and the timely significance of the Mayan calendar. His latest books are The Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization and The 9 Waves of Creation. His next book, Quantum Science of Psychedelics, The Pineal Gland, Multidimensional Reality, and Mayan Cosmology, is due out in March 2020. You can reach him at Calleman.com, treeoflifecelebration.com, Mayanmagics, Magix.com, and 4-ahau.com. Welcome to the show, Dr. Calleman. I'm so pleased and honored to have you on today.
Well, thank you very much, Joan. I'm very happy to be with you. I will enjoy this.
Yes, I know I'm going to. As I said, I have researched your work and studied it through other people, and I just can't wait to dive in. So I'm curious, how did you get interested in studying the Mayan calendar?
Well, I think basically it's really something I was like a mission I was born with. The real question is what triggered it, I think, and that was a trip that I did to Mexico and Guatemala in 1979, and it was at a time before anyone really started talking about the Mayan calendar in any spiritual meaning as we do today. And that trip changed my life in a sense. I just felt that I had a purpose, and the connections with the Maya that I met at that time were very important, and it seemed like they I don't know, they were quite welcoming, I would say, to myself, and it just seemed like they thought I had something to do with what they were, their history and culture, and based on that, I just, since then, the Maya have never left me really, and it took another 13 years, I think, until I actually started to do my own research on the Maya and their ancient science. But I do feel it's something I was born with. It was a mission I was here to do, and but that was the first triggering point for my interest and deepening modern people's understanding of what their calendar and science was all about.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you went to Mexico then. That must have been a beautiful trip there. So in your book, The 9 Ways of Creation, you talk about the tree of life and the cosmic axis. Would you explain what these are and how they're related to these waves of creation?
Well, the tree of life, I think, is really, I mean, first of all, we should be aware that it's a mythology or a symbology that was very widespread in the world in ancient times. I think it's very hard to find any culture that did not talk about a tree of life or a world tree or something along those lines. Sometimes you hear the words axis mundi and other things, but it really is referring to the same thing. And of course, if people in so different places on our planet, I've encountered it among the Maori in New Zealand, certainly among the Maya in Guatemala, and as well as from my native Sweden in Scandinavia, the world tree went by the name of Yggdrasil. Which was a huge ash that was bigger than the earth and the heavens and so forth. And so they all had this idea. And so the question then, is there really some reality to it, or is, did they all just by accident come up with the same wrong idea? And I don't think so. I think there is a reality to it. And but what has been a little bit confusing maybe is that it's a tree. The tree of life exists on many different levels. You certainly have it in your body. In a sense, you might say that the spine is aligned with the tree of life. You have it in the polar axis of the planet. You have it in the axis of our galaxy, around which the stars are revolving, and you have it on a very cosmic level, in basically the entire universe. And I think the last piece of the puzzle is the cosmic level, and to actually verify that there is what I would call tree life on the cosmic level. There is fairly recent, in other words, in the past 20 years, there come from modern scientific studies, the discovery that this cosmic axis that they now call the preferred axis in cosmology, that divides the universe in certain very interesting ways. And obviously the ancients they didn't have the kind of instruments that modern satellites service have, but they had another kind of intuition than we do today, and so they were confident of just taking for granted that there was a tree of life. And I would say that this cosmic axis that has now been discovered that embraces the entire universe, that is really what they talked about as the tree of life. And it is, I would say that the tree of life is kind of a geometry. It's not a physical thing, but it's a geometry, and it's a geometry that exists on several different levels. And the easiest way to look at it might be to look at our own bodies. The spine is sort of aligned with an axis, and that's what you would call a tree of life. And this axis is part of a geometry, and so it's not a thing in the material sense of the word, but it is a geometry that pervades the universe, and where it exists on several levels, and it's connected. These different levels are connected through these what I would call the trees of life, and it's this I think is really what's given the structure to all life in the universe. Taking ourselves as an example, this that goes through our body, and whether you are coming from the Chinese system of meridians or the Indian system of chakras, there is still a line that goes through the body and separates our two hemispheres, and that's really ultimately the source of our life, I would say. So it's not surprising that the ancients revered this and built mythologies around it and tried to connect it with it in different ways. Even though in the past 400 years or so in the modern world, people have not really been able to connect it because they, for different reasons, we tend to see the material reality. And if something is not a thing, but an underlying geometry, then we will not necessarily recognize it as real. And that's unfortunate, I think, that is hiding our real origin.
It's interesting because it reminds me of the flower of life that we see all over the world, and the tree of life, at least the Kabbalah, the Kabbalah and their tree of life, you can draw from the flower of life. Just wondering, do you feel as though that might be related?
Oh, I would think so. I talked about the tree of life as an axis, and that's a simple way of talking about it because it's fairly easy to demonstrate. But so I always, I try to come from things that you can actually verify. But I'm sure that the actual geometry of the tree of life is much, much more complicated or complex. And part of that might be what you talk about as the flower of life, which would simply be an expansion of this axis that I talked about. And I'm sure it's much more complex than just an axis, and the flower of life may very well be part of it. It sounds like it, just the way it's been talked about in ancient stories, but the reason I haven't gone into that very much is simply that I can't really it's not so easy to verify its existence, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I understand. I also write with science and spirituality, both of those. And in one of my books, Hardwired to Heaven, I write about the heart. And what I was seeing was what I call the holographic grid unit that is on the unified field, or this, this cosmic soup. And it's mirrored within the heart, and I call it the sacred coordinate. So it's interesting that we're seeing, I'm seeing this, on a micro and macro level. And the same thing, when I read that, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. Yeah. So the 9 ways of creation you talk about in your book, they all emanate from this cosmic tree of life. So how do they then affect human consciousness? There's 9 ways, and then maybe you want to share a little bit about each, but I'm more interested in, more recent history and where we are now. And I know they run concurrently, and you're going to explain this to people too. But so if you could just basically tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm basing myself always primarily on ancient Mayan views, and there is a reason for that. Some could say they would say that there are dragons in China, there are trees of life all over the planet, and so forth. There is one thing that attracts me as a scientist to the Maya, and that's that they developed a science based on numbers, what we refer to as calendar. And what that we, with the Mayan mythology or the Mayan ancient science, we can actually check it out. We can actually see, does this really match what is happening in the evolution of the universe or not? Whereas if you just have some general concept of waves or dragons or serpents or so forth, we can't check it out. But we can check it out with the Mayan calendar, which is their way of their science, so to speak. So that's the reason, you might say, that I've been so interested in the Maya. Not only that I was drawn to it by some kind of purpose, but it's also that we can make much more. We can understand much more in terms of our modern knowledge because of the fact that they had numbers and most other ancient cultures not. So that's what I want to start with. And when it comes to the waves, the 9 waves of creation, that would in ancient mythologies have different names. What we do know is that in the same sense as that pretty much everyone in ancient times revered the tree of life, they were also revering the serpents everywhere, I would say. And there are many cultures we know that looked upon the serpent as a creator god. The Aborigines in Australia, they talk about the rainbow serpent. In China, we have the cosmic dragon. The serpent was prevalent in Egypt, and among the Maya and the people in ancient Mexico, in Mesoamerica, they talked about the plumed serpent. And the plumed serpent wasn't any minor god. It was the divinity, I should say, the cosmic power that the whole city of Chichen Itza is built around the pyramid of the plumed serpent. And the world's largest pyramid is actually in the city of Cholula in Mexico. That pyramid was dedicated to the plumed serpent. And the city of Teotihuacan, that has the biggest pyramids in the Western Hemisphere, that was also built around a temple dedicated to the plumed serpent. So I think we should realize that this is not some kind of a sideline or something like that. This was really what they looked upon as the most important cosmic power. And the thing is, though, that, when we modern people go out there, we don't know at all what they're talking about. We don't see any serpents in the sky or anything like that. But what I'm saying here is simply that, this is something that makes sense. The existence of these creation waves, the existence of these serpents and dragons and what have you in the ancient times makes sense if we recognize that we, with our modern language, would talk about these as waves, simply sine waves.
Right.
Very powerful thing that they experience very strongly. And they would say, now we have the plumed serpent is coming here to bring us civilization and calendars and arts and crafts and all these kind of things. And then they would talk about the plumed serpent sometimes abandoning them, and it's a sort of a usually has what we in retrospect can see had a disastrous effect on their civilizations. And now this all makes sense, if we just go to see that maybe there are these waves of creation that we have we've become blind to as modern people, but sort of the ups and downs of civilizations is actually driven by a kind of a wave that that they would refer to by dragons or plumed serpents or these kind of things. It's not so easy to find a symbol if you consider a sine wave. It's not so easy to consider a symbol in nature. The most important near thing to choose is a serpent, and then
a snake.
Yeah, and it's a tremendous amount of not only mythology but also magic that has been developed over the times around the serpent. And so anyway, in Mayan science, I would say that the serpent that's become the most well known is what the actual calendar that talked about as the long count, a calendar that they always use to date their steles, their pyramids, their altars, and everything like that, and which started 3115 BCE before our count of time, and has gone up to our current time. And what that calendar actually maps out is a wave movement or a plumed serpent, if you like. And it has had, what that means is it has ups and downs. It goes up and it goes down, it goes up and it goes down. And when it goes up, it means that it stimulates our thinking. It has a direct effect on our minds. And when it goes down, it has the opposite, and it becomes sort of a resting period of history. And this is fairly easy, in my view, and to track and see. This has real effects. I would say that pretty much all of the evolution of civilizations comes back this particular wave movement. Then that's one of the 9 waves. The one that probably has become the most famous. But then there is a set of 9 different waves, and they each have a particular frequency. And the first of these 9 waves goes back all the way to the beginning of the universe, what in modern language is referred to as the Big Bang, the first emergence of matter, and so forth. And then on top of each other has sequentially been activated 9 different waves with different frequencies, and the one that was recently activated, the highest, with the 9th wave that was activated in the year 2011 and has the highest frequency. And each of these waves has a particular purpose. They don't have the same purpose, but especially the higher waves, going from the 5th wave to the 9th wave, have a direct influence on the human mind, how we perceive reality, how we create reality. And but the truth is, as I see it anyway, is that what we do, our creation of a civilization and so forth, it goes back to these waves that are not of our making. They come from the center of the universe, some unfathomable intelligence, that a lot of people probably call God or whatever we call it. These waves is really what gives us the inspiration to create, and to the extent that we respond to those inspirations, we will create civilizations, and those will go up and down, and that's what the ancient peoples were very well aware of. And especially important to me have been the Maya, because they give the exact timings of these waves. It's not just speculative ideas. It's something that we can track and see how they unfold.
Exactly. And I know that most people heard, well, the Mayan calendar ends on December 21st, 2012, and you recalculated to October 28th, 2011. And why was that?
Well, there are reasons to believe that the December 2012 was a miscalculation. And the foremost of those reasons is the fact that there is something called the sacred calendar among the Maya, that's called the 260-day count. And some of your listeners may be familiar with that. What it means is that every day is associated with a particular day sign and a particular number that captures the energy of today. Yes. That there are 260 days, and what that means is that it really has to end on a day sign that is 13 Ahau. Now, December 21st, 2012 was not 13 Ahau, it was 4 Ahau. And that does not make sense. One source for people that want to go deeply into this, which really does require some background in Mayan mythology or calendar. I have an interview with a professional Mayanist, Mark Van Stone. It's on YouTube, where he comes to the same conclusions. Basically, there had been a small adjustment in ancient times of the calendar, and that's reason that it doesn't doesn't end at the date when people thought it would. And one thing I want to add to this is the fact that is determine creativity and how humans perceive the world. And if you compare the years 2011 and 2012, which maybe a lot of people have forgotten by this time, but I still want to point it out, and then people might remember and come back to it, is that the year 2011 was a tremendous year of, you might say, rebellion across the world. The Arab Spring, that's the year of the Thai movement. That came. There was this real desire for oneness that was expressed, and at the end of 2011, as I point out, Time magazine that always chooses a person of the year simply choose the protester, the person of the year 2011. The reason is that the new state, the new mind that ninth wave that was activated in 2011 sort of made people see reality in a different way. They saw it much more from a unifying perspective. And whereas the year 2012, nothing really happened. It was very little, and certainly nothing happened on the date December 21, 2012. And a lot of people had been saying that things would happen dramatically on that particular date. And nothing happened. And so, it's not only that there were reasons to begin with that people really have gone deeply into the Mayan calendar can understand not to expect anything to happen on December 21, 2012. And it didn't. But people have been misled, I would say, by which so often happens in these kind of things, and thought that something would happen. But actually, the immediate thrust of the ninth wave was in 2011, and even if that wave of new thinking, of new perception of the world came to an end, it certainly was very clearly visible in after it has immediately after it had been activated in March of 2011.
Yes, there was a difference in those years, definitely. So,
yeah.
As I said before, when I read your book, and I love your book, The 9 Waves of Creation, you say that all these waves are running concurrently. It's not like we go through wave 1 and then we leave that and we hop onto wave 2. They're all still running. So are we still being affected by, say, the 8th wave? And are people still at that consciousness following that wave? And are people on the 9th wave? And how do we get all on to the 9th wave? How do we, jump, how do we get all on board? You know what I mean? Because the 9th wave sounds a lot better. I know you're going to talk about it, but how do we do that?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, it's not like there is a simple first one wave and then a second wave. No, I think, it's quite clear, for instance, that the 9-storied pyramid in Chichen Itza, it reflects these 9 levels of consciousness. And it's built, each wave is built on another level below it. And the lower waves don't go away. They continue. But over time, over the history of humankind, higher waves have been added to those below it. And the real meaning of the year 2011 then was that that's the time when all the 9 waves started to run in parallel. You might say the climb of the pyramid was completed, and that there's just one ancient inscriptions from the ancient Maya about this, which is called the Tortuguero Monument number 6, and what that talks about is really that this 9-storied divine structure will appear in its full regalia. Or in other words, at least how I interpret it, meaning that all the 9 waves will be active, and that's the full regalia of this divine creation structure. Now, it's as I said, yes, these waves, they influence our perception of the world and how we create the world, and that will happen in different ways. Different ways will have different purposes. And from our perspective now, I'm not sure that we will like all the different waves. Deterministic. It's not like when one wave's activated, we have to follow that. It's more like it's a template in the sky. It's a quantum activated, and we can download it. We can let it descend and shape our own mind, but we don't have to. And this is really, what the Maya actually described was a quantum science. It's not really always recognized by that, but one of the characteristics of quantum not determined. Doesn't mean that we're forced, that way of thinking is forced upon us, and we don't have a choice about it. But now that all the 9 waves are activated, we can choose what we want to resonate with, what we want to download, and even if people are not aware. Downloads coming from the cosmic center, they still do it, and so we are in a time when all the 9 waves are activated, and but it doesn't have an effect on the board. Instead, what this means is that some people who have climbed already and essentially to the top of the pyramid will see the world much side light and the potential of downloading the 9th wave, which is really unity into that. The pyramid, choosing to climb the pyramid, and they are still in some kind of a duality, and the most prominent of the duality waves is the 6th wave, what the Maya would call the long count, which really, it didn't only create civilizations, it also created all the hierarchies. It also created all the inequalities of as they are expressed in the social world. And
inequalities, so you said?
that's the reason that at this time the world, especially if you look at certain Western nations like the United States and the United Kingdom, the societies are tremendous, and people simply have made habits of downloading certain waves, and since people have a choice about it, we're now in a quite complex situation. Certainly, when it comes to where we going.
So we could have people at the 6th wave, 7th, 8th, and 9th waves then.
Yeah, right. I was characterized.
You're starting to break up a little bit. Keep talking. You're breaking up just a tad.
Yeah.
Here. Okay.
Okay. If I some broad.
There we go. You're still breaking up.
Okay. Me now.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Okay. Okay. So.
It was.
Haven't been. There's contacted tribes.
Yeah, you're still breaking up a bit. Okay, you're back. You're riding the waves, Dr. Calleman. You're riding the waves. I can't hear you again. Okay. Well, while he's going to be calling back, I'll just say a few words here to fill in until he does call back. So, what's happened then, we have people at all these different waves, and actually Dr. Calleman was able to predict the economic downturn in 2008. And let's see if I can bring him back on here. No, he's gone again. When I do get him back on, I'm going to ask if he can predict again another economic downturn. It's quite interesting what he's gleaned from this calendar because it is scientifically based. It's based on numbers. He also talked about the rise of separatism and nationalism, and certainly that book was published in 2016, and now we're experiencing a lot of that currently. So I'm just wondering, what he might say about that, and hopefully we can get him back on. Well, I'll continue to try, and we'll try to get him back on again here. So, also, he talked about the rise of the feminine, and that was really crucial to the calendar. So, again, we're seeing that today. We're seeing a lot of these changes. And I can tell that the 9th wave is coming in a little bit more every day. Certainly with all of the things that have been coming up lately about the sex crimes of, in particular, young women, but women in any event. So we can see that there's changes being made, but we're still not all there. We're still not all on that 8th wave as he talked about. So, and again, he said it's our choice. It's our choice what wave we want to ride. So let's see if we can bring him back on again. Dr. Calleman, are you there? Are you there, Dr. Calleman? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Well, maybe he'll come through in a moment. He'll try calling back again. So he also said that the calendar predicted a change in the two-party system, the Supreme Court, Congress, and the presidency. So when we get him back on, I'd really like to know what he's thinking about what's going to happen in the next 5 years in the United States with election coming up next year and really a divisive country here in the United States lately. And this nation state idea and this nationalism and this division that we have been seeing here. And you know what I usually say is the pendulum has to swing way the other way in order to come back into balance. So, maybe we're into that swing right now, and, maybe it'll come back again. Like Dr. Calleman, I hope he comes back again onto the show. So, and if he does, I'm going to find out, we know that we have all 9 waves activated, but if he sees anything in particular about what might be going on currently with the waves, and in particular, can we, when we resonate at this unity consciousness, that's what the 9th wave is. The 9th wave is about equality. It's about really the golden age in the Garden of Eden, where he refers to the ego as evil, but when we surrender our ego to the collective, to the unified field of consciousness, to the unity of what is, and we do that work, not for ourselves, not for our individual egos, but for the collective, then our work will be supported. So in other words, if you're working towards the betterment of Earth and all of her inhabitants, your work will be supported. This is what he's saying, because that is what unity consciousness is. We realize we are all one, and we are on this one planet together. And, all we can do is work for each other. So that's all we can do. And when we enter this unity consciousness, it's definitely a shift. He talks about downloads, and really what I think is being downloaded and what I talk about and what has been talked about on the show by other guests is that we have these waves, and it's true. We have this galactic super wave. That's one of the theories of bringing all this energy out from the galactic center through the galaxy. And what is that? Well, light energy carries information. That's what it is. And so we're being informed by this super wave that's coming at us. And, is that the 9th wave? Well, maybe that's how these waves move. They move through the galaxy, and then, we get bombarded with it. We get these downloads, these energy downloads. We're actually taking in the light. I actually come up with a theory of how we become enlightened and hardwired to heaven. So let's see if we can get Dr. Calleman on again. We're trying one more time. Are you there, Dr.
Yes.
Calleman?
I'm
very
here,
good.
Yes.
Let me catch you up, because I've been talking while you've been gone.
I
Oh,
heard.
you heard it all. Okay. So
no,
have
no,
I
no,
misspoken yet?
No, I didn't hear it all. I just occasionally heard. But now, I think the waves are better now.
Okay, yes, literally.
Yes. Well,
so there's a couple questions. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to make some really rough descriptions about people associated with the different waves.
Mm-hmm.
And you might think that, there are still a few non-contacted tribes, indigenous tribes in the world, and they would probably be which are characterized by the unity of nature in a deep sense of it, and they would be what I would call the fifth wave. Then we have the sixth wave, which is the civilizational waves, and that would be pretty much religious peoples, nationalist people who has that kind of basic values. The seventh wave would be more like the typical materialist scientists who denies any magical or spiritual aspects of reality. The eighth wave would be the wave. It really has two major components at this time. One is the rise of the importance of women in the world. That's fairly recent phenomenon. The other aspect of it is the digital world, so to speak, which is, the world is becoming more and more digital. Now, the ninth wave, however, would be like going back to the unity, and I would simply call it enlightened people, non-dualistically thinking people, and that would be the very typical or very rough description of what kind of minds these different waves are bringing. But then in practice, each of us is really a unique combination of the influences of these waves, and it's always more, I would say, it's more or less of these influences, depending on how we have the kind of habits we've created of downloading these cosmic quantum states or cosmic aspects of the mind, I would say.
So I'm curious because of the timing of everything here, because you say that the political and economic systems of the U.S. are deteriorating, which may bring the rest of the world with it. So the current astrology is also predicting a disintegration of governmental and societal structures, because we have Pluto and Saturn and Capricorn, and that conjunction is going to perfect in January. So is there a correlation, or can you answer this? I don't know how much you know about astrology. Is there a correlation between the Mayan calendar and astrology?
I would say no, but to begin with, I'm not very familiar with astrology. I'm a total layperson in that regard. I think there is a difference, though, that what we usually refer to as astrology, it has the Earth as its center, and Mayan cosmology or Mayan energies are based on the center of the universe, and we are sort of downloading, receiving those. Our brains are receiving those influences. But I would say no. I don't think there is a correlation. But I also want to say that I really don't know much about astrology.
You also predicted the economic downturn in 2008. So do you have an idea based on the calendar when we might go through another one, at least in the United States? Or it's all global economy, so I mean, it'll be all over.
Yeah. Well, to begin with, I want to emphasize how amazing that prediction was that I did, and I think I already wrote it in my first book in English, which was written in 1999, and it missed the beginning of that what's called the Great Recession in 2008. Missed it by 2 or 3 weeks, and that prediction that was about 10 years in advance, when
I'm starting to lose you again. Okay.
The 90s was based at a sort of good economy, you might say, but it really was a prediction made based on the energies, in this case of eighth wave, because I knew that at that time the low length it was a downturn in the wave, and the eighth wave made me expect that. Today, I'm much more hesitant to make any kind of predictions, and the reason is the complex pattern of all 9 waves being run in parallel, and the role of the role of choice in of human beings is greater now than it used to be at that point, and so. But if there is some kind of an economic downturn that will be activated, I think the bottom will be reached in 2021. But it's not a hard prediction like I did before, because the times are different now. All 9 waves are running in parallel, and that's just a prediction based on the 7th wave, and so it's not a hard prediction, but it wouldn't surprise, just by common sense. It's been such a long upturn for the economy, you might say, and there always comes the pendulum always swings.
Right, swings the other way. Yeah. It's that sine wave again.
Yeah, it is.
The up,
it really is.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
So you say that apocalyptic scenarios come from people with dualistic minds. What about the larger cycles the Earth goes through, like the geomagnetic pole reversals and sun cycles? Can the 9th wave minds mitigate or change these larger cycles which scientists know exist? Is it merely a choice between following astronomical or biological cycles and creating the golden age of the 9th wave?
No, I don't think so. I think these big cycles you're referring to, biological cycles, or what is like sun effects and these kind of things, they happen regardless. And then the whole climate change that is happening now, I would call it a long-term effect of a certain. It's not an up and down simple thing. Rather, it is that the 6th wave, which is the one that brought civilization, it really very much was a wave that sort of brought a mindset that legitimized humans' superiority over nature, and as a result, for a couple of thousand years, people have not really cared about the fact that we've become a huge population that is constantly pushing the limits of nature and the animals and the plants and everything like that. And as a result, we are now also seeing the climate changing. But it's not like a wave up and down that we can sort of just do anything about simply by following the ninth wave. I wouldn't say so. Maybe I would say that our perspective and our understanding would change by following the ninth wave, but it's a much more serious thing, a much more difficult thing to deal with than to just make. Yeah, you understand. We've been we for a long time we have had a mentality telling us that we can do what we like with nature, and now we're paying the price for that. That's how I look upon it.
Mhm. Mhm. You also liken the ego to evil, but you say that when we enter the ninth wave consciousness, it's like we still have an individuality, but we surrender that to the collective ego, if you will, and work towards the collective. And instead of just for ourselves, like, oh, I got to go make money so I can feed my family and blah, 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 blah. But we change our perspective of it, that we work towards, the entirety of the planet.
Yeah. Yeah, if I said that to begin with, if I said that ego is evil, I have overstated it. But rather I would say that the kind of ego that was developed by the sixth wave has really been very destructive to nature. To say that it's evil is not necessarily the same thing, and if I've said so, I have overstated it, and yeah. But then I forgot what you followed up. You said something more.
Well, I said that instead of having an ego that would be just for myself, instead we evolve to what's best for all.
Yes. I think that's what comes with developing resonance with the ninth wave. I think that's what comes with it. Yes.
So, what steps can we take to attain this unity consciousness?
Well, I think there are two things. The first one is to follow the ninth wave, and which is a high frequency wave, meaning that a period in this wave is only 36 days, and it means that it has an a upside, a peak of 18 days, and followed by a valley of 18 days, and it goes on like that, also so forth. And following it means that we become, first of all, we become aware of the fact that this wave exists, and this is the highest wave, and so logically speaking, this is really what it brings. The kind of mind that it brings is really what I would say we're meant to follow. And how are we? The first thing then is really to start observing how we as individuals are influenced by this particular wave, and that is something that tells us about the nature of what's meant for this planet, for people on this planet, because it is the highest wave. So that's one of the things that we as individuals, and I think it's a crucial thing. As it stands now, there's very few people that do this. Very few people even know of the existence of this wave, and I think it's very important to know about it, and also then to develop those aspects that it calls us to develop ourselves in those directions. Now, the second thing is much more broadly, and I can't say exactly what's good for a particular person, but the way it works, I think, is that all of these waves are sort of setting out as creating certain ruts for us. We have become accustomed to the particular waves that we have been brought into, and develops our minds and our ways of relating to the universe and to nature based on those particular waves. It's like roads almost that we get used to following certain roads, and then we start that there are no other roads to follow. That we more or less have to follow the habits of certain roads, of following the habits of certain waves. And I would still say that there are serious destructive aspects of some of the lower waves, it means that we have to also find ways of realizing that these roads are not the only ones that we have to follow. And for that, I think there's a range of different what should I say, spiritual practices or psychological methods that we can apply in order to free ourselves from the mandate to follow these waves and to follow these roads, so to speak. And that I think is up to everyone to make the choice themselves. My forthcoming book, Quantum Science of Psychedelics, it talks about the potential that psychedelics has in this regard of sort of helping people to make a clean slate. And I'm not, one of the important conclusions from this forthcoming book is that we shouldn't really set psychedelics apart from many other spiritual practices, that on a certain level they have the same consequence, which is really to liberate us from a certain kind of compartmentalization of the mind that comes with these waves. And so there are other means by which you can do this, and whether it's diksha, whether it's holographic breath work, whether it's meditation, whether it's these things. I'm sure there are many ways this can be done, but it does have to go with an intention to do that, intention of sort of up the dualities with which we have been living our past lives. At the same time, familiarize ourselves with the ninth way and the kind of uniqueness that brings, and the creation of kind of thing is something that I would suggest is something we can do in the current situation in order to help the best possible outcome of the world as that we're living in today.
You talk about using the Mayan calculator, the ninth wave calculator. How do you use that? Yeah. How can that help us?
Well, it's it just tells us the one that I'm referring to in that book, and I don't really remember the website by heart, but it just tells us that for instance, at this moment we're talking, we're in the upsurge of a ninth wave. We're at the beginning of climbing up a peak, and that the peaks are the time periods that are bringing nature, you might say. That peaks where when the ancient Maya would say, now the plumed serpent is here bringing us new forms of creativity, so to speak. So what that means is that for our own particular individual situations, we should look at what's the peak bringing to us. What which is, in other words, is help this cosmic plan manifest the way it's meant to, which is really then ultimately to lead to a mind of unity that allows us to recognize the unity not only between all of ourselves, but also between ourselves and nature. And once we recognize that, take action that is consistent with that. But the calculator that you're talking about is just is a judge. Is a help. It tells you where are you in the wave. Are we in a peak or are we in a valley? And there are different consequences to how we are to listen to the cosmos in these different periods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you can find that at 4-ahau, ahau.com. You can get a calculator there. I have that on the show page too. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today, Dr. Calleman?
Well, we came very much into the present moment and all those, and that's what this was for. I think the title of the talk or our discussion today was something about the multi-dimensional.
And you're cutting out again. So maybe we won't hear this. I don't know. Let's see if you come back. The multidimensional universe, the call dropped, so I don't know if we'll be able to get him back on. But, the title was, of course, the Mayan calendar and our place in our multidimensional Mayan calendar, our current place. So we've talked about that current place. We have all the ways activated, and it's up to us to be mindful and to choose and to use the tools that we have and to do our own healing work and to heal ourselves and to work towards the collective. Because as I said, we will be supported when we do that. So thank you so much, Dr. Calleman, for being on the show today. And next week's show, I will have author and longtime researcher Gene Manning, who will talk about the upcoming inventions that can replace polluting fuels. So I'm sure you'll want to stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Much love on this Tuesday. Take care, everyone.